As an introduction to the course, I want to start with two epigraphs and a picture. The first epigraph is a poem by Walt Whitman that I think succinctly captures the relationship of the American people and music. Poetry, of course, has close ties to music. The earliest poems were in fact songs, but the melodies were forgotten over time as human civilization moved from oral traditions to written language. As a poet, Walt Whitman embodies much of what we will encounter in American popular music. Starting in the mid-1850s, Whitman developed a new, original, highly individualized voice in poetry. He discarded the formality of the poetic language that was popular at the time, instead writing in a plain-spoken, informal, free verse style reflecting the fresh, innovative spirit and vibrant energy he found among the people in the rapidly expanding industrial city of New York and in the natural landscapes of the New World. We get a good sense of Whitman and his uniquely American voice in the poem, I Hear America Singing. I will read the poem, and as I do, pay attention to the plain-spoken, informal style that is consistent with the people Whitman is celebrating. How would you describe the groups of people Whitman mentions, and what might this tell us about who Whitman thinks best represents the American spirit? I hear America singing. The varied carols I hear, those of mechanics, each one singing his as it should be, blithe and strong. The carpenter singing his as he measures his plank or beam, the mason singing his as he makes ready for work or leaves off work. The boatman singing what belongs to him in his boat, the deckhand singing on the steamboat deck, the shoemaker singing as he sits on his bench, the hatter singing as he stands, the woodcutter's song, the plowboy's on his way in the morning or at noon, intermission, or at sundown, the delicious singing of the mother or of the young wife at work, or of the girl sewing or washing, each singing what belongs to him or her and to none else. The day what belongs to the day, at night the party of young fellows, robust, friendly, singing with open mouths their strong, melodious song. I highlighted the line, each singing what belongs to him or her and to none else, because it displays one of the strongest values of American society, individualism. Here we see Whitman's focus on American workers, but he points out that each individual's labor is itself a song contributing to the community of voices. Notice Whitman does not describe the music of America as one would describe a symphony in which a conductor brings the many instruments of an orchestra into unity so that the ideas of a great composer can be brought to the masses. This would be a more European romantic notion of the power and purpose of music in a society. Whitman's image is much more democratic. He sees the community of voices as having their own individualized identities, lending their own uniqueness to the music. It is the innovative uniqueness of each voice that he hears all at once when he hears America singing. This poem seems like an excellent preface to our study of American popular music, which is the music of the people, individualized expressions of the average, everyday American worker, not of the genius elites of European high society. So what we are doing in this course is listening to America through the people's music. This quote from Amiri Baraka, who wrote Blues People, Negro Music in White America, is the second epigraph I want to use as a preface to the course. In this quote, Baraka is talking about music as a way to listen to history. He is talking specifically about the blues. Since the blues is a foundation for all American popular music, we can understand our history by listening to the music just as we understand the music by knowing its history. Listening to music as history involves hearing the Americans from our past who are singing their lives to us, communicating a living moment that we can share through music. Which brings us to this image, a picture that I think helps us understand what we're doing in this class. On the left, we have the overhead view of a tree that's been cut down, leaving us with a view of tree rings. This image has a remarkable likeness to the object on the right, a vinyl disc with grooves etched into it that reproduce sound. Though in the living world a tree and a vinyl disc might seem very different, we could say the similar circular patterns reveal that both actually have a similar function. Both are records. For a trained eye, the rings tell a story about the life of that tree. The circular pattern is a unique fingerprint of the history of that tree and a record of what was going on in the world around the tree, climate patterns, occurrences of fire, etc. Someone who has learned to look for the patterns and interpret them can tell a lot about the changes that have occurred in the life of the tree. Now let's imagine the vinyl disc on the right is a record of the changes occurring in the life of America. This particular record has all of American popular music on it. In this class, we'll be dropping the needle at various points along the record to discover what was going on in the life of America at various points. We'll read the patterns, try to detect and analyze the recurring themes that we hear. This is the image I want you to keep in mind as we move through the history of American popular music throughout the semester. I do want to point out one more similarity as well, just to keep us honest about the kind of activity we will be engaged in while studying pop music in this way. Notice that in order for someone to examine the life of the tree in the tree rings, the tree had to be cut down. There's a paradox here because the best way to really know about a tree's life is to examine it in its lived moments. But when someone examines the life of the tree by reading the rings, the tree is taken out of its actual lived context. They're trying to learn about the tree's life while it is no longer living. I think it should be noted that we are doing a similar kind of violence to popular music when we take it out of its proper context to be examined scientifically, as we tend to do in an academic classroom setting. Dance music is meant to be danced to, so when we listen to it as a record of a time and place in American history, we are taking it out of its intended context in order to study it. Of course, we will be learning quite a bit from listening to music in this way, but we should always keep in mind how the method of our participation with the music may be altering the actual lived meaning of that form of music. Okay, so keeping our limitations in mind, let's start thinking about what we mean when we say we are listening to America, finding patterns in popular music. We will focus on what is meant by listening in popular music in just a moment, but before we do, let's talk briefly about some of the characteristics of America we're likely to find while listening to American popular music. These are a few of the dominant ones. Compared to many nations, America has a relatively short history. The idea that America is the new world has attracted people who want to make a new start. America, therefore, is a nation of innovation, of making a new future rather than dwelling on the past. This might explain the innovative nature of American popular music as well, and the fact that such a value has been put on developing a new sound or style in American music, particularly in rock and roll. Those studies have shown that politically the U.S. does not necessarily live up to its democratic ideals. Democracy can be seen on the dance floors and in the free individual expression of jazz musicians and the independent spirit of the blues and rock and roll. America attracted many people who were looking for religious freedom. Many of our political and social tensions tend to have roots in America's religious heritage, and we often see these tensions arise in popular music as well, often in country music's mix of Protestant Christianity and nationalism. Rebellion is a recurring theme throughout American popular music, and that makes sense, especially considering that the beginning of America as a nation was rebellion against England. The free market economy, the idea that the market should be as free from government regulation as possible, has led to the huge commercialization of music in America, especially pop music. We will see again and again how the dominance of middle-class America, who tend to spend the most money on popular music, has driven musical trends. Industrialization. The U.S. developed at a time in world history when the economy was moving away from an agrarian, agricultural society and toward an industrial society of factory work and machinery. This technological emphasis also plays a role in the development of popular music, especially after World War II. Pragmatism is a philosophical stance that developed mostly in America and focuses on action. Get her done might be the plain spoken way of describing this mentality, or the motto, whatever works. This philosophy certainly arises out of industrialization in America. Do what has to be done is a useful philosophy for a nation on the move to expand westward and create prosperity in an industrialized economy. Americans tend to be less ideological and more practical overall. This can be seen in pop music as well, which is not generally designed to make you think. It is much more about action and dealing with the realities of a free market economy. And finally, as a nation of immigrants, America has benefited musically from the mix of cultures. We also should keep in mind that popular music as well as film and television have had a very significant role in unifying a nation in need of an identity. We will see that one of the foundational characteristics of American popular music is the appropriation of other cultures. African slaves borrowed European styles, Italians brought their own opera heritage to the Broadway shows of New York that were often written and sung by Jewish performers, Mexican song forms were picked up by Texas cowboy singers and mixed with German polka. Okay, so those are some of the dominant characteristics of America that we will hear as we listen to American popular music. Let's take a look now at what is meant by popular music in this class. Let's look at a common definition. Music created with commercial success in mind. This is commonly what people mean when they talk about pop music, commercial music. This definition is a way of contrasting what is played on top 40 pop radio with other forms like classic, classical, or folk. This definition is problematic for us because some music crosses boundaries. For instance, Scott Joplin's piano rags are considered both jazz and are also studied in the classical tradition. The Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is a pop record with many symphonic elements. And Mumford & Sons uses a lot of folk music instrumentation and style characteristics, but the music is in no way anti-commercial, as many of the folk artists of the 60s were. For the purposes of this class, we will use a broader definition. Popular music is mass-produced for a mass audience and draws from a variety of musical traditions. We are not going to listen to someone's band that plays in their parents' garage to a few of the neighbor kids, though that music might be worth listening to. We're going to focus on the popular music that best exemplifies the social changes and characteristics of American popular music as a whole. There is certainly a built-in bias here. I just want you to be aware of the limits of our investigation. The final definition we need to address is listening. Obviously, if you're in this class, you know how to listen to music, but I want to make clear that we are not just listening to music for enjoyment. I hope you enjoy the music we are listening to, but enjoyment is not the main purpose. The type of listening we'll be doing in this class, which can include enjoyment, is often called critical listening. Critical listening seeks out meaning in music, which includes how it's put together, its cultural significance and/or historical development. We will not dwell on music theory in this class, but I will point out any structural elements that help us appreciate the innovations or stylistic achievements going on in the music. One of the goals of critical listening is to give you an even greater appreciation for and understanding of the excellence reflected in the music. But I hope our critical listening will also lead to some self-discovery, as we see the ways American popular music has helped shape our national and even individual identity. In everyday life, people often don't think carefully about the music they hear. That's because popular music is designed not to call critical attention to itself. But in this class, we will be focusing on that and even recognizing the lack of critical attention in popular music as a phenomenon. Let's try some critical listening. We're going to listen to several versions of a very popular song. After reading the BBC article on the original version of What a Wonderful World, listen to all the versions I've made available to you below this video, then follow the class activity instructions.